I never thought that the realizing the dream of pissing in bottles in the back of a van going down the Highway 5 would inspire me and energize me to an actual career where I actually look like a human being. But
I think we're good on the audio front if you're ready to rock.
I think so, man.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. I'm sitting down with everybody's favorite Vancouver firefighter mosh warrior. Andrew, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Hey, happy to be here.
Of course. And Andrew and I have known each other for a long ass time, and I'm really excited to be talking about hardcore and how that transfers into the careers that we go down and the things that we want to be involved in our regular lives. But before we do that, Andrew, can you just give me a proper intro of your name, how you're known in the hardcore community, and where you're based?
Yeah, I'm Andrew. I was born and raised in Kelowna, but I've been in Vancouver for a number of years, just going through the motions out here, playing the music. Just really came out here looking for the opportunity, wanted to be more involved in the hardcore scene, playing in bands. I'm a firefighter out in Abbotsford, and just a big advocate for harm reduction, just emergency medical service nerd. So I'm so sorry. I'm going to punish you all with this kind of stuff.
No, we're all going to get educated on all that. And I'm really excited, honestly. I think a lot of those topics are really important, especially in the times that we're in. Before we get too deep into it, we got to obviously do our Scoped Exposure Bev check. I just have a very basic lime LaCroix with me, and I didn't give Andrew enough time because this is a newer thing that I'm trying to bring into the podcast. But tell the people at home what you're sipping on.
Well, I've got stage prop from last night. It's the Ultra Paradise. You may have seen it, looked at it, and given it a nah. We'll give your head a shake. It goes. It'll keep you moving. But today it's just water with cubes.
Water with cubes. I love that. Before we get too much into it, to be honest, I know a lot of people in hardcore are like avid Monster fans, but I might have not actually just had the right Monster, because I think I've had to be honest, I think Monster was the very first energy drink I've ever had, and I was like, oh, I'm not into this. But then when I started having like sugar-free and organic and like stuff that was a little bit more like less like Shrek piss, like to quote what's that movie? But anyways, I'm just curious if there's a ultimate Monster flavor that you think applies to anyone. Something you want to shout out.
I would say for the uninitiated, going for the white sugar-free. Honestly, their sugar-free line, you don't get the sugar crash, get all that sweetness, and you get all of the that caffeine. So that's typically where people make their first mistake. Is they don't go for the sugar-free.
Yeah.
I won't touch the original. The original will make me feel like a mutant. So I won't touch it either.
Yeah, it's the same with Red Bull. I can't do a regular, like I'll feel like a version of myself that I'm not excited to be for the rest of the day. But Andrew, as far as getting context around how you got into hardcore music, can you kind of talk to me on how you found out about it when you were living in Kelowna, and how you started getting into bands and that sort of thing? Take us down the rabbit hole of Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. Kelowna's a small town. It's 100,000 people on a good day. But it's always been the pit stop between Vancouver and Calgary. So we would be lucky enough that a lot of tourists would come through. And that would lead to really just a lot of exposure. And with it, I always knew what hardcore was, but I was more into the metalcore of the time. And then I think the first time I saw a hardcore band was in 2006 or so, and it was a local band. You might have heard Born for Battle.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what really sold me on it. And had heard hardcore, but I've never actually seen a show. And so actually seeing a hardcore band perform with other hardcore bands, that was really what made the switch flick. And again, like with it being the pit stop between Calgary, more and more tours would come through. Some local bands from Vancouver would come through, same Seattle. And it was really in the MySpace era. So you had the top 8 and you would search through and kind of seeing live photos of other live shows in Calgary, shows in Vancouver. You know, I wanted to be up. I just thought it was the coolest thing. You know, it's just a little weird, like trying to find out for your energy, right? And seeing these live photos and just having just this is what I always thought. Hey, like Kelowna could be like this, and for a time, it really was. Um, for a time, it was. It was a really really hot spot, and so that's really it. And also, it kind of built on like some of my high school friends too. We would listen to the music, read lyrics, and then get in the car, and then we go to the show. And so kind of having that collective memory as well, that shared experience was just like, and then going out there and seeing other people really much doing the same thing, kind of made me want to contribute a bit more. And that's what kind of led to playing in bands, try and convince people to try and learn an instrument and really look back and God, we put that on the internet. And then that led to, like booking shows. And like some of the older guys who were doing the promoting, they would help me like, hey, this is what you should do for booking shows, and I would do it. And then I was a little bit more in the hands-on process. So there was no single really record that anyone gave me that kind of said, oh, this is awesome. It was really going to the show itself and just seeing everyone have a good time, and then getting smacked in the face and not getting angry about it for some reason, and then just really moving forward with it. And it was just something that just becomes, it was just so enjoyable to share experience with like people that still haven't come up for air, really.
Yeah, I think there must be something in the genes as far as going to a live music event and getting smacked and not being pissed off about it, because there are people on the latter side, they get smacked for some reason, they're like, man, this fucking sucks. But the other way
I kind of
around,
left that little controlled chaos, and like, oh man, those people look. For some reason, I thought these people look cool while they were doing it. I want to look cool doing it too.
Yeah.
And now, like none of us look cool. We're just all having fun, though.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious if there's maybe some people that saw like stage diving and like crowd flips and stuff, and they're like, well, I don't know, maybe they don't have access to like going to the beach or a pool and doing that. So it's like, well, at least I can do it at a live show.
I don't know what I know what the appeal is. Like personally, it's very subjective, but I like anyone else coming in, like it does look crazy.
Yeah.
But it's our crazy, so that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good way to put it. So, and I can't help but mention this as far as just the you mentioning just like, because not everyone has that music background, whether their parents forced them to do piano lessons, and if they did piano lessons, then they can play drums or guitar or whatever it was. But yeah, hardcore is this weird thing where it's like, I want to play in bands with my friends, so I'm gonna like force them to learn how to play bass, or like, okay, like you can hit stuff on the drums, just like get it in time for when we do the demo or what have you. So no, I think that's a really interesting point about hardcore as well.
Yeah, skill wise, it's an accessible genre. Like you don't need much skill wise. You don't even need much gear wise. But
yeah,
it was all fun. Just like as a kid and just like growing on that. I got a new pedal, show off the new pedal kind of thing, and just having like an avenue of progression where you can put your energy was just something I didn't have growing up. And then when I got it, this is it. Let's go.
Yeah. So kind of the seeds were planted and grew really fast when you were in Kelowna, and then you moved out to Vancouver and started to do some more bands and things of that nature. Hardcore is also a weird thing where there's a lot of desire to move somewhere because there's a festival in town. There's a very active scene. So what was your mindset to do that? Like, did you have family in Vancouver as well, or was it like, I'm just moving for hardcore and maybe just to move to a bigger city?
It was a little bit of I would say it was half professional, half music. Kelowna being a small town, started to fizzle a little bit, and I still kind of wanted to, I wanted to play in a band that was a little heavier on the touring. I had a label that I wanted to get moving, and I'm just like, you know what, I can take those, passions, and I think I'm gonna have more of a channel to work through in Vancouver. But in addition to that, like Cologne in general just didn't have so many professional opportunities. Like I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do yet, and I kind of felt stuck in that respect. So going to Vancouver, a place that I have really adored for since I was a kid, just like the natural choice. And so kind of came down here looking for, like a career progression, but having with playing music, have met a lot of people living down here. And so when I got down here, it was just contributing to this scene really, as best we can to try and get more kids out there, more touring acts coming through, and just try and, just again, like just contributing what energy we have to, building it. So that was really cool. And when it's from coming out to pretty much right up to COVID, there was like a significant growth in the amount of people coming out, the amount of bands that have been churning out, and that's just, it's just like you always want to find ways you can you can contribute, whether that's through music, whether that's through promotion, just or just even going to shows in general.
Yeah.
And so like that it was a little bit of both, and it was just just gotta get out of the small town, go to the big city. They got more restaurants. They got
Yeah, no, I had felt that, I think, for myself as well, as far as like, Winnipeg and then eventually moving out to Calgary. And I think with Winnipeg, what maybe made me more hesitant at the time was like, at least like I think Kelowna is like more like, oh yeah, like we're this beautiful little city in the Okanogan Valley. It's like like it truly is like a really cool place to be, at least from an outsider's perspective. But Winnipeg always got a bad rap when it came to being like the butthole of Canada and just like not having just X, Y, and Z. But I felt like a lot of pride for where I was from, especially with like hardcore music at the time. And yeah, there was some hesitancy when me and my now wife were looking to move, because it was like, oh well, I just didn't want to leave that piece of me. But I definitely feel like scoped and all the things that we're doing and all the opportunities that we were granted would have never happened if I stayed in Winnipeg. There's kind of like I love Winnipeg, don't get me wrong, but there is a little bit of a ceiling when it comes to either creative or career wise, for sure.
no, absolutely, and I think we're mirroring each other in the same respects there.
Yeah.
It's just like sometimes you have to just uproot and move somewhere where there's just more resources available. There's a larger network, and just makes doing just the basics a little easier, which allows you to expand upon, and just really build. So yeah, like and it really did help out a lot, with all the touring acts coming through. I got better at understanding really like what a touring band's needs were. So I knew what my needs were as a touring band, but I didn't know what other people's were. And that kind of like and for a lot of people who were saying media, they just really couldn't afford doing vinyl record releases. And so that's kind of like I would start scouting around, and then Hard Loss really took off for a bit there, because I used just general just seeing what everyone wanted and what everyone needed, in a large in I guess you could say a larger market, and just applying it to some hardworking bands. And so yeah, there's just like sometimes you just have to make the risk and just get a place where you can grow a little bit better.
Yeah. And obviously, like, everyone's different. Everyone has different values as far as, do they want to just live in the mountains and just be chill and not have the access to some of those things. But, you know, when you look at a place like LA or New York, like, you don't really move to those places to like have a very comfortable and cushy living situation. You're usually going there for a career, to make connections, to survive ultimately. But yeah, it's different strokes for different folks, for sure.
Oh yeah, I can definitely say my first place here was definitely not cushy. So yeah, you're pretty on point with that.
100%. So for a lot of people who follow your personal page or just know you personally, is you're a firefighter, and you've been. I don't know. I know that there's different tiers as far as like being in school and doing different things, but definitely tell me what level you're at, and let's break down how you just got interested in doing something like that.
Yeah. So I basically I'm an auxiliary firefighter, so that means I still have to hold down a construction job. But I get a little pager that rings and wakes me up in the middle of the night, and I run and I go.
Oh wow.
Run.
Okay.
Go. So it's definitely something that's been quite a progression because there's paramedic school, there was fire school, and then getting out and getting experiences so that when I apply and there's about 4 or 5 stages to a hiring process that I don't get cut on any one of those. So it's definitely been about over 2 year process of getting tuned and dialed in for it. But in the and really it's kind of funny because like all my time in hardcore is actually taught me what hard work is. So when it came time to make those big steps, I could focus my energy and I could really pursue that path. But uh, it kind of, in terms of picking this career itself, it really snuck up on me because I was working in disabilities and in support work. And on the bus ride home from North Van, some kids had been partying, and some poor kid just threw up all over himself on the back of the bus. His
Oh
friends ran away and left him back there, and I'm like looking back, like, oh shit, okay. So I go help this kid out. Bus parks and get him off. Gonna call 911 or whatever, just trying to take care of him. And
right.
some people from across the street start yelling at us. And I look over, and it's a truck. It's a fire truck, and they're like, "Hey, need help?" They pull a U-turn, and I just got to watch them work. And like, oh, I think this is it.
Wow.
And so that it really snuck up on me, and from there it was just like that cool idea that never went away. And so from there, just dove in, did the paramedic school, did the fire academy, and then just tried getting experience. So I've done some wildland work in BC here, um, getting up in the mountain and just trying to put out those fires. But one cool thing that this path has really exposed me to is harm reduction. Um, and that's namely in like Vancouver's downtown east side. So, which is for anyone who doesn't know, it's the rough and tough neighborhood around town here. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of gang activity. There's a lot of drug use. A lot of survival sex work. It's there's some really good folks down there who are having a real hard time. So it kind of got me to the world of harm reduction, which I think we were kind of talking about just with COVID has made it even more dangerous, not just for people down there, but anyone using
Yeah.
recreational drugs.
Yeah. And yeah, like let's definitely get into that and try to really break it down and simplify it for a lot of the folks at home where it is their first time hearing about just like that, because I think it's really important to realize like how like this gets into a larger conversation about like even a couple of years ago, like even weed of all things was illegal and it was all like through the streets and stuff like that. And now like people are seeing, oh, like legalizing this drug specifically has come to a lot of benefits to our
Yeah.
society and governments and things of that nature. But yeah, like break down as far as um, because you did an IGTV video where you're talking about benzos specifically, but yeah, like break it down for me as far as like the biggest impact you've seen with the drug line and COVID.
All right. Yeah. Here's that punishment time I was telling you about. Yeah. So yeah, with the harm reduction, I'm with an organization. We patrol around at night, handing out food, waters, but we also hand out like clean gear for people because it's a neighborhood with they estimate about 80% of drug users have hepatitis or hepatitis C. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
so sharing, basically sharing any needles, basically basically means that when these people are ready for recovery and they start taking the steps, um, then they're going to live the rest of their life with hepatitis C. And they're going to have to overcome that. So with harm reduction, we aim to prevent that. We aim to keep people as healthy as possible, and build bridges to make the road to recovery easier. And we've definitely seen an impact. And it's even more important now than ever. And it kind of branches out just to really virtually every community now because with COVID, it's really put a stranglehold on the flow of drugs into Canada. So, and that's from like maybe heroin to and cocaine, but things like Molly, they're all um, at risk as well because it's being cut with a lot of synthetic opioids like fentanyl and carfentanil. Um, Fentanyl is like the top of the line painkiller, and carfentanil is an elephant tranquilizer. Neither of those are good things. But we have also seen it really benzodiazepines have been basically cut into whatever. So just to give like that basically because no new drugs coming through, stretch what you got. Um, benzos are things like Xanax and Valium. Um, yeah, the quick kind of rundown is like if someone's doing cocaine and they pass out, there's a chance that what they had was cut with an opioid of some sort or benzodiazepines. And it's kind of like knowing the steps just on not always how to reverse an overdose, but how to recognize it and what actually does harm during an overdose is really important because both of those things because they're so common and both of those things the treatment is making sure your patient's breathing because though benzos and opioids they both repress part of the central nervous system that monitors your breathing and maintains your breathing. So when you have too much of that your breathing just stops. So like getting a pocket mask from a Narcan kit and getting air, trying to get the skin color turned flush from like a white or blue is like step number one. Yeah. And then like you can use naloxone, and if they wake up, oh, there was an opioid of some kind. If they don't and they're still passed out, oh, it's a benzo of some kind because they both affect different parts of the brain. Gotcha. Yeah, like Narcan is for opioids, and benzos they use something called fluazanil, I think. I don't know, that one's over top of me, but which is a little dicier to use, so paramedics only carry it. But so like testing is really important. Using with if you are using having someone around is incredibly important, and just going out and getting training and just understanding what the actual risk of an overdose would be is I'd say the most important. That way you can recognize it. Like if someone's doing Molly and they're looking lethargic, that's not right. Yeah, right. They should be so yeah, just like with general harm reduction, and it does work a lot. Like I hear a lot of instances of people in the streets with the training and having these fresh supplies and having these Narcan kits. It's saving a lot of people's lives. But I've also heard it within some close social circles. So it's not something that's so far removed. It's like a friend of a friend or a friend who had an accidental OD because he or she used like just like Molly or whatever and just passed it on the couch. It's dangerous. So it's just kind of like spread the awareness that because I feel like someone has OD or whatever and they'll hit them with Narcan, and if that doesn't work, it's really really dangerous because now your patient hasn't been breathing for even longer. So it's kind of like knowing your steps.
Yeah, and that was the biggest thing in the video that you kept like saying it multiple times, and honestly, that's really good because just saying one thing in a educational piece usually like people are like, oh, and then it's out their brain. So repeating it, just the fact of just like get the breathing down, and like you said, as far as just like being interested in becoming a firefighter, like those situations where when you least expect it is when it's most likely to happen, where you're just like walking to your car after work or you're on the bus and then something happens. But if you could be prepared, that could be life changing for that person. As far as like getting training for stuff like that, is that very accessible for people? I know that's hard to say for people living all over the states or throughout Canada on this podcast, but what would be, what do people search for if they want training of that level?
Yeah, so well, naloxone training is very accessible now. It's free through the Red Cross. Yeah, you'll leave. It's like a 2-hour course. and they run through all the steps on how to recognize, how to administer treatment, and how to give naloxone. And you can pick up naloxone kits at most pharmacies out there now will carry them. So if you go to a pharmacy and just inquire, chances are they'll just hand you one. And those are always good to have. YouTube is a wealth of information for virtually anything medical. If you do want to go down that rabbit hole. Um, but if you're ever looking at extending your scope and you want to be able to do more in terms of medical aid and first aid, Red Cross is they train up to like a really high workplace standard. It's called OFA 3. You don't need to go that high all the time, but that one you can do some crazy shit to help out. But I honestly would say like just getting a couple friends together and just doing some of this free Narcan training through like the Red Cross, then you're all on the same page. So if anything does happen, well, a lot of people is if you do have an incident, it's so much easier if you have more than one person working on it, right? It just it's easier to focus. You aren't juggling any tasks, so and you're doing good. You're looking after your friends. You're looking after your community when you have these skills.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that's a huge point. This example is a little removed from like drugs of that caliber, but even when we were doing the Scope 2-year anniversary show, randomly some kids came up to me and like I had shout out to Nikki and Jessa who were helping me book that show, but someone came up to me and they were like, "Oh, I think someone broke their ankle or broke their foot during this band," and then it's like, "Oh, I had no idea." Like no one talks about like mosh medics when it comes to like putting on a show of that nature. And then I think it was I'm not gonna name drop him in case he's embarrassed or something, but as soon as it was kind of assessed and got some ice on it, he was like back in for the next band. But like you said, getting a couple homies together, if you're always going to be at shows together, if you put on shows together, what have you, and just having that training if and when that could happen, because the likelihood is maybe higher than you expected, like you were saying.
Yeah, it is. It is higher than you expect. Just because all these like in terms of like benzos and opioids, they're creeping their way to absolutely everything. So, like it is higher than you expect. It could be like a friend of a friend at a show or something like that. That you don't necessarily know the person, but oh shit, what's going on? And they have to might have to get to work. And I think like it's like that really with a lot of things. So it's like if you have the time and you have the energy to go out and learn a set of skills, I'd say it's 100% worth it because there's going to be a situation where you're the only one around who knows what to do. And it doesn't necessarily have to be medical. It can be great many things. Like if you're the master guitar tech and Buddy blows up his amplifier, oh, you're stepping up. It's your time to shine.
Yeah, that's a huge example, actually. Just like, yeah, the actual like doing that knowledge and being the one to be like, oh, drum skin is broken. I got that. Like I got it hooked up already.
Yeah, it's just a general mindset that is, it's good to have. But yeah, like I remember it was like I think it was like the Southern Alberta Hardcore Fest. The second one was what mean that. I think one of the Lethbridge hooligans did a flip off the stage and bonked his head, and no one knew what the hell to do. But a certain Calgary guy, Mr. McIsaac, jumped right in because he knew what the hell to do.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what band that was, but I do remember that going back through the footage and be like, oh, this dude flipped off and did not get up. So yeah, no, I think that's a huge point. I also think it's like pretty interesting that being so like educated on harm reduction and having that be a passion of yours while being straight edge is really, really interesting to me. I see a lot of like straight edge bands, just like there's almost this like idea of like people who like choose a lifestyle where they're not having any crutches of any kind, but actually being very educated on like what certain drugs do because of like experiences in their family or their school life. So How is that balance for you as far as like just having that overall mindset, but also needing to be educated and probably cementing a lot of those decisions you made probably early on?
Well, like when I was younger, I definitely had the like, oh, I don't need a crutch. I can do this all on my own kind of attitude, and where it was a little more like self-centered in terms of like why I was straight edge.
Sure. Yeah.
And then kind of like just as getting older, it's just seeing more of like really what's going on in the world, like getting a better understanding of traumas and addictions. It kind of changed a little bit to recognize like it's a little bit more of a, if anything, it's a privilege. And it's kind of like you're in a position. For me, it's like I'm in a position where I don't smoke, I don't drink, do drugs. I can either show that off, be a big macho guy, or I can again, like you hear me say, like time and energy, or I can use that time and energy to and push that outwards to kind of making an impact, if however I can. So it's kind of like just like I don't know, seeing like the socioeconomical conditions of people and what they're living, how they're living, understanding like unresolved traumas due to someone, and gaining a better just more, yeah, just like more of an understanding of what different walks of life go through, and kind of seeing a less as something that is like, oh, it's for me. It's just, I don't need a crutch or anything to, okay, now this is my baseline. I don't smoke, I don't drink. That's okay. Cool. Use that time and energy to contribute to your community in some sort of way. And that's kind of like, that's how I kind of transfer into to harm reduction. Uh, it's actually, I'd say, more of an understanding of how people live and what shit they go through, which is in fact me into harm reduction, in harm reduction, and just being straight edge. It's just kind of I don't know. I see it as a responsibility to like, because I don't means I should help those who do struggle with those problems.
Yeah.
So
Damn, that hit me like a ton of bricks. Like as far as being straight edge, it's your responsibility to make sure the people who maybe don't have, I don't want to say the strength, but just have the different struggles in their lives. Because I think that's very, and I talked with Evan actually because you brought him up. I talked about it on his podcast, just like there's different struggles with people because for me, like I can have a beer and be like, yeah, I'm good for the rest of the night. And some people are like, if I have a 6-pack in my fridge, it's gone that same night. So
yeah.
yeah, like deploying more empathy and like understanding that like everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, both like in their professional lives, their personal lives, and just like recognizing that it's not just like, oh, I'm better than you because I'm straight edge or things like that.
Yeah, and it's like personal accountability is definitely part of it's part of everything. Like you are responsible for the choices you make, but what a lot of people disregard is just all those underlying issues that they aren't exposed to, like the unresolved traumas. Yeah, like the condition that they grow up in. Those are just things that a lot of people they willfully ignore, but they have such an impact on how you progress through life, and and that personal choice that you do make. So just having a better understanding of that, um, kind of morphed my perspective of straight edge.
Yeah.
So it is still a personal choice. It's a choice that I made, but because I've made that choice, now I'm in a position where you got to look at the world a little differently.
100%. Is there what do you think is the biggest stigma around just like drug culture and things that you're kind of seeing on a daily basis? Because I'm a firm believer as the more that you learn about a subject, the more that you realize that you know nothing about it,
Nothing.
and there's so much more to learn. So yeah, is there a misconception or something that you can kind of like shatter the glass um, for the people at home who might not see it as deep as you have?
Yeah, one simple one I think that I personally learned, is that when you see someone out on the street and struggling, maybe they're struggling with addiction, or just homelessness in general, is it's so simple to think, but no one wants to be there.
Right.
No one wants to be down there and struggling in that manner. And I feel like, I used to walk down the street way before I had this exposure and just kind of think like, why is he down here? Like, what did he do? What did they do?
Right.
Um, no one wants to be there. Like, regardless of the choice that they like people make, um, they're there because it's like, it potentially the end of the road for them. That's it. So it's kind of just recognizing that that people who struggle still have agency over their lives, um, and that they, even though they do have these struggles that you and I don't have, that's not what defines them. What defines them is their agency, to and they're working just as hard to get out from that position. We just don't see it. We don't hear those stories of how hard they're working to get out. I've heard stories of a guy, just he was 5 years in recovery, and the voice in the back of his head, his addictions came back, and just just one time he didn't have that. He didn't. That's the support network that got him into recovery. He didn't rely on it, or it wasn't there for him at that moment, and he had hit the reset button. He was back where he started. You know, that's something I can't fathom. But to have like an overwhelming force like that, affect your life. And he tells us a story. He's like, but I got this new place and I'm moving in. I'm going to be getting out of here. So people that have agency over their lives. Like, so when you see someone on the street, it's don't I don't think that's what should define them. Um, and sometimes it takes having a conversation with people, which in itself can be difficult to do. But that was the big one. Just kind of like just hearing those personalized stories about either how they wound up in this position or how they're getting out of it, and which can be incredibly inspirational. But that was one that's, yeah, it's like people that struggle, they have agency. That's not what defines them. Their position does not define them, and
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember I was working for a place, and we went and volunteered at a homeless shelter, and one of the volunteers there was just instead of it being looking at someone and be like, oh, you are homeless, it's putting a label on them, um changing changing that to, oh, this person is struggling with homelessness, like they can't lock down a job, or they're in a position where they're figuring things out, versus just being like, you are this. And and that's the meaning for a lot of people. So
absolutely.
so just being, yeah, like like it goes the same for like, you're a drug addict or you're addicted to drug, like saying you're struggling with these things because like you said, like the world that they grew up in, potentially that might have been all that they know. They might have not had the privilege of growing up in like a better neighborhood, or just having parents who actually cared about them. Like there's so many facets that projected people on a harder path. And but like you said, there's countless stories of people that have overcome those, but at the same time we still need to create a world for these people to actually have a much higher shot at like overcoming those things.
Yeah. And the way you phrase it is exactly how it is. Is just in terms of, oh, he's homeless, so she is homeless, or they're an addict. That language really does matter in the conversation, because they're they they're a person who's struggling with, and it because like those labels, they really do dehumanize people, and when we do that, it's not benefiting anybody. It's not benefiting you, it's not benefiting them, it's not changing the ills that our society does have. So it's recognizing the conditions and struggles is step number one, and then doing something about it, step number two. So the way you phrase it is exactly how it is.
Yeah, and even though you said this was the the section of the podcast that you're like, oh, it's getting real serious, this is honestly like really crucial conversations that I'm glad we're having on this. So as far as kind of transitioning back to more of the firefighter stuff that you're doing, I honestly think that um, that career is super interesting. Like just seeing some of the behind the scenes that you've been sharing on your social. I know that I saw this one video, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was all these firefighters, and they're in the station and they're watching some kind of like soccer game. And it's like some big game, and as soon as like that alarm goes off, everyone just like flips out of their chair and they go and like suit up in like 40 seconds. So can you kind of pull back the curtain a little bit as far as like what some of that is like, what you have to prepare for physically, but also mentally with some of those things?
Yeah, I believe that video is in Croatia during the World Cup, so you
Oh,
know how
okay.
important it actually is.
I think it's like as soon as the fire truck pulls away is like the game-winning goal happens or something. So,
Mhm.
anyways, I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it takes. It's really a competitive industry, I guess you could say, because every department's different. Every department has their own qualifications, but it's more schooling than you would expect. Um, and then one thing is like I've always been told is what can you bring to the department, what can you bring to your team, and what can you bring to the community. Those are the three things really you have to keep in mind when you're going down the road. Because at the end of the day, that's directly who we answer to. Is we answer to like the city council, and fire department screws up, you're in front of city council, and the budget's going to get reviewed. So and but with it is I'd say there's a lot of physical conditioning, because your gear weighs 50 pounds minimum. It doesn't breathe, so it gets really hot in those things. You have a vapor barrier in there, so all the work you're doing, and you're not cooling off at all. So it's kind of like getting that physical conditioning, that mental conditioning. But for me, it's like when going through the processes, I pretty much lost count about how many denial letters I've gotten about applying, going through the interviews and saying, sorry, not this time. And these departments only open up maybe once a year, maybe. So so that sort of thing, it getting kind of that disappointment, and just taking a step back and not letting it get you down, and just keep moving forward, and eventually you get there. And with once you're actually there, it's the hard work doesn't stop. There's a lot because now you have to drill and you have to practice. You have to learn all the equipment. You have to get up to speed so that if anything does happen, you can work alongside an experienced team in completing whatever the objective is. And it's all team based. Like you'll have four guys uh, with one goal, and everyone's doing one step of that. So yeah, it's definitely like you have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to work with others, and that in itself takes practice too. If it doesn't come naturally, I'll practice it, and it does.
Yeah.
But
And yeah, I think just that overall process of like, because I've seen that with some other people that I know who are in that process of becoming a firefighter, and I don't know if there's some similarities just with hardcore, because hardcore overall is very accessible, and there's a lot of people who like want to give you opportunities, not because you've earned it or anything, just like out of the goodness of their heart. But at the same time, there's lots of like, hey, sorry, this fest is full, or hey, we're actually going to take this band on tour. So there is a lot of no's and denials in that sense. But, like you said, it's like, if this isn't meant to be for this way, there's 100% going to be something down the road. I just need to keep at it and keep the mindset and not get too down on that low.
yeah, yeah, like with like playing in bands and just creating, like it's always been fueled by passions, right? You do it because you love it, and using that passion to be like that's your energy to go and create and be better and just perfect. And it's actually translated personally for me, it's translated so well into my career path, because you see this lofty goal as a band being like, oh, we're gonna tour down to California or Texas or wherever. It's a big lofty goal, and then you do everything you need to do to prepare for it the best you can, and then you just go and do it. And really with firefighting, it's the same way. I saw like, oh, truck goes by, I'm like, okay, that's it, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, step one, I need this, I need this, I need my academy, I need my paramedic, I need experience. You set up, and then you transfer that passion, and and it keeps driving you forward, because you imagine yourself doing it. So it went basically riding and drive. I never thought that the realizing the dream of pissing in bottles in the back of a van going down the Highway 5 would inspire me and energize me to an actual career where I actually look like a human being. But but it does. It's a really transferable energy. If you follow your passions and you let it really guide and energize you, as
Yeah.
cheesy as that sounds, it really can lead you some places, and you can accomplish way more than you think you could.
Right. This just came up because you brought up the pissing in bottles. I never would have thought about this, but do fire trucks have a bathroom on the truck?
No, you're holding it.
You're holding it, or
You're holding it.
that's fair because it's the whole like conversation. Like RVs are like, okay, you can pee in this, but you can't poo. But
Oh,
for some reason, it just came up as soon as you brought that. I'm like, is there something on that fire truck? It is. It's pretty compact from the outside.
yeah, there's just well, we've got 3 seats in the back, and two in the front with a huge console in between, and there's in that console there's all our medical gear, an oxygen tank, a whole bunch of waters with like electrolytes and everything. Like it's all stocked up, so if you're going to be out for a while, you that's where you go. We have like, helicopter landing lights in the back of our
Oh,
truck.
sick.
Like we have like there's like all this like crazy shit back
Yeah.
there, but it's packed full. But there's no pot to piss in, so if you got to go, you're holding it, and sometimes you're out there for like 10, 12 hours too. So good
Damn,
luck.
I got a small bladder, so I'm glad I'm not I didn't go down that line. This is a maybe more of a level one question, but I think it would be kind of good to know as far as like someone who's getting into being a firefighter. Is it maybe naive to think that like the only thing that you're going to be doing is like showing up at a huge burning building and you're just like putting things out? Like what can you break down like percentage wise? What are the instances that you guys are kind of responding to?
Yeah, so structure fires definitely are one of the rarer calls. Um, you're going to get a lot of medical, a lot of it's called coverage. You might go cover at another hall while they're out on a prolonged call. Uh, a medical or motor vehicle incidents are probably that, and it's like your medical calls, and then it's your motor vehicle incidents are your number two. And those happen all the time. But and there's it's it's kind of funny. It's like because like again, like I'm not a full time guy yet. Like, I'm still doing my time trying to get experience and trying to get in there. But it's kind of funny. It's like when my pager goes off and I look and it's like, oh, coverage on another hall. Everyone will rip to the hall, and there's only gonna be like 2 or 3 cars there. Only a few people are responding. But then like my pager go off and I look at it and just like, oh, apartment fire. You'll get there and the parking lot will just be full and just like there's it's it's when you get one of those, it's game time. Like
For sure. Yeah.
no one's joking around when they're at the hall. Everyone's just like headset on, listening. Everyone's like in a zone. So they don't happen often, but when they do, it's you're
Everyone's
moving.
like, yeah, everyone's like
Everyone,
super focused and tuned in for that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly medical, a lot of medical, just because fire stations are stationed throughout a town strategically to cover an area. So what we do, it's different in the States where a lot of their departments have the paramedic services and fire,
Yeah.
but ours is provincial and then municipal. So a truck will go and typically get before an ambulance just because it's closer. And we service a general area. And then the ambulance might be coming from across town.
Yeah.
So yeah, they'll do like just first responder stuff. And then paramedic will come and either assist with the call or, we transfer care over at that point.
Yeah, that's actually funny that you bring it up because I remember I was driving home yesterday, and then just like you hear the sirens, and you're constantly like, okay, do I got to move? But then I see this truck just like coming out, and then as soon like the first turn that they're taking is onto like 16th or like for essentially a major street, and then going to a next one. So yeah, that planned out geographicalness is like very very smart in that sense. I'm always I don't know if you've had this as far as listening to a hardcore record and then it's some like moshy like guitar ring out and then I'm like is there a fire truck or a cop behind me, but it's like just the record, like they put that sample on there
All the time.
all the time.
All the time. Yeah, yeah. I'll get psyched out by that still for sure. Uh, yeah, it's it's cool stuff, man. Like it's worth the hard work. You know, when you find something you really want to do, it's worth the hard work. And if whatever life experience you can apply to getting there, you know, it will help you. Like, but yeah, there's don't watch Chicago Fire or 911. Those are the worst examples. I have an aneurysm when my mom has it on TV. Uh, it's not nothing like
She's
what it
like, "It's
actually is.
you, Andrew." You're like, "No,
Like, no,
not."
like it's just there's something called freelancing, which is when you do something without orders, and it's like the cardinal sin. Like you
Oh,
don't freelance,
okay.
don't freelance. It puts you and everyone else at risk. Then you watch one of those shows, and they're like everyone's just doing whatever.
Yeah.
Like no.
Jeez. Well, yeah, because freelancing in my world of video is like, oh, you're just on your own. But that, yeah, with a fire unit, you want to be in sync with your unit. You know, do the calls are coming from one person, not just like, oh, it's my time to be a hero. It's time for
Yeah,
my Netflix documentary.
yeah, exactly. Like if your captain's not giving you the order, rethink before you do it, because otherwise, you know, like it's severe to the point where it's grounds for dismissal.
Right.
Yeah, so
And then it's all over again.
that's all
Um,
over.
yeah. Well, Andrew, I think we talked about a lot of really great things on this podcast. Before we kind of like transition into wrapping up, is there any main tidbits that you want to end on? Any piece of information that we didn't share, or just what's the general thing that you're hoping that even if it's just one person really gets and understands and takes that
Mhm.
information out into their lives? What would that be?
Well, one thing I do want to, for anyone who's listening into the Vancouver area and has made it through this long,
Nice
to my
job.
punishment
Yeah.
talk here. Check out Street Saviors Outreach Society. It's the organization that does harm reduction into the downtown east side. We welcome all new volunteers. No um, qualifications required. If you want to help your community out, please come check us out. Um, but really, one big tidbit I want to give anybody is if if hardcore has changed your life in some fundamental way, take a look on how. Like whether it's like the people you met, the inspiration that's given you, and project that outwards. Whether it's into your career or into your community, and if you have the time and the energy, then you honestly have the obligation to use that to benefit the world around you in some way. It's something that you'll hear on the record is we preach is just trying to change this world. Uh, if you have the time and the energy, you have the obligation to do that. And however you contributed to hardcore and however it changed your life, I think it's very special and very unique that it allows us to do that.
Yeah.
So just harness it, take a look around you, see what makes you special and what's your contributions have been, and guarantee you can do something with it.
100%. I love that. And yeah, I want to echo that. Everyone's got different skill sets in this life. Everybody listening is good at something. And it's not just writing sick riffs or doing blast beats. There's a lot of things that you can take into the world, whether it's through volunteering or raising awareness or what have you. Definitely hardcore. I heard this on a documentary where um, hardcore is not just fuck the man, it's how can I change the current state that the man has made in my world. So
Absolutely.
yeah, hard back of that. The tail end portion of this podcast, Andrew, is a favorite mosh story that you want to tell. So it's anything off the top of your head. It doesn't need to be some KO that you did on someone or KO that happened to you. Anything that's first to your mind is how we say goodbye on the pod here.
Oh God. um, God, I'm friends with Taylor Stewart, man. That guy rolled these for everybody, and honestly, they're all. My favorite, I'd say honestly, my favorite mosh story is go on a scoped exposure, look at the Vein set in Vancouver, and watch the stupid shit everyone's doing. These are grown ass adults. There's one clip where there's 5 consecutive stage dives in the same area at the same time. Who does that? We do that. So, but oh God, honestly, I'm so sorry, man. I have too many to think about that
No,
I
no,
could.
that's fine. It's
But that is the video. That's one of my favorites. And I look back and I watch it frequently and be like, man, we're idiots. This is
Yeah, RIP to 333. Shout out to Matt who filmed that. Shout out to DBK. Yeah, anything else that you want to plug here, Andrew? Did you want to share the handle of that organization for anybody? Or I don't know if you guys are on social.
Yeah, I think it's at Street Saviors Outreach, I think. But Street Saviors is the organization, and a quick Instagram search will come up with it. And it's up on Facebook as well. But all new volunteers welcome. No training, we'll train you. Get out there and help prevent some damage there.
I'll definitely put that link in the show notes if you're listening to this podcast, or in the description if you're watching it. Andrew, this has been a blast. You've been a homie since the get for Scoped, and I really support what you're doing and love that you came on and shared some valuable information on the podcast here today.
No, it was great. Thanks for having me, and keep it going.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, guys.